Jackson. Thank you for listening to the Military Schooler podcast. This episode is the second in our Head of Schools series, where we interview the heads of many of these fine schools. Today, we are starting a little unconventionally with a story.
When I first got to my first squadron, me and a couple other guys that were brand new to the Air Wing, so we weren't all in the same squadron. We flew different aircraft, but we all knew each other. And as we're sitting in we would call it the dirty shirt on the ship, is where the aviators ate, because we were not allowed to go down into the ship's mess, because we were always wearing flight suits and we were dirty and stinky and all that kind of stuff. But as we're sitting there, CAG, so the Carrier Air Group Commander, who is essentially the boss of our boss. So we were in squadrons, and our COs, our commanding officers, worked for the CAG. So he was actually a very polished individual, but he was a legendary F-4 Phantom guy in Vietnam, probably over 300 missions. And he was one of those guys that didn't say much, but when he said something, it was like E.F. Hutton. You wanted to hear what he had to say. And he walked up to our table and said, "Can I sit down with you, gentlemen?" And we were all Lieutenant JGs. He's a full captain, and he sat down, and we're all just looking at him like, "Okay, who's going to say something first?" And finally, he says, "You're all probably wondering why I'm sitting down here." And we go, "Yes, sir. Why would you sit down with us?" He goes, "I recognize all four of you." There's like 4 or 5 of us, I can't remember. But all of you are new to the Air Wing, and I need to make sure that you understand what I expect from people who join my Air Wing. And so the first thing he said is, you need to understand that you're professional assassins. We pay you to kill people and blow things up on command, every time, first time, on time. And for that reason, you need to know your business, be professional, be the expert, and realize the people that you're fighting against, they are going to be attempting to do the same thing, so you must be better than they are. So know your job, be the expert, and work with precision. Secondly, nobody likes paperwork, but it's a necessary evil. If I assign you to do something, I expect you to do your due diligence, provide me a quality product on time that I can utilize to make decisions. And finally, I would say this is the most important piece that really had an impact on me. He goes, finally, if you are put in charge of people, I expect you to be in charge of them. That does not mean that you order them. That means that you will lead them. And leading them means that you take care of their needs as they fulfill our mission. That means that you go to bed, or you rest after they rest. You eat after they eat, and you sleep after they sleep. One of the most important things that you will recognize, if you take care of them, they will overwhelm you with what they'll do for you. So that kind of permeated my career in the Navy. I mean, I got that, I received that brief, or that soliloquy in 1989, and I kind of said, you know what, this is how I'm going to pattern myself. And when you look into Scripture, that's kind of the way Christ led. I mean, he was a servant leader, and I believe wholeheartedly that is the best model, both from a personal life and personal observation. So that's what I want to instill here at Fishburne Military School.
Today we're excited to have Captain Mark Black. He's the 12th Superintendent of Fishburne Military School. Fishburne was founded in 1879 in Waynesboro, Virginia, serving grades 7 through 12. Captain Black is a retired naval aviator who graduated from a great military college. And, sir, we're really excited to have you on the podcast.
Well, Andrew, thank you very much. It's a pleasure and privilege to be speaking to you today about Fishburne Military School.
So let's set the location a little bit. You were telling me that it's a beautiful day up there in the Shenandoah Valley. What's going on campus?
Well, right now in campus, we are at Waynesboro, Virginia, and that's a town of about 20,000 people, again, in the Shenandoah Valley. We have summer school going on right now, in which the students are going through and either remediating a class that they need to, or in many cases, students are getting ahead for their schedule because they might want to be taking a certain class their senior or junior year, and to do that they have to take a preliminary class, and so that it spans the gamut in terms of what people are doing. And there are some students here that are just taking some of our enrichment classes. We're doing some outdoor adventure. Of course, ROTC is in full swing. Several people are coming here in the fall, and they've never done JROTC, so they want to be able to compete for some of the leadership positions which require higher advancement in the LET or Leadership Educational Training curriculum, and therefore they're getting those knocked out as well. So there's a wide array of people and intentions with summer school, and it's a full-time occupation because it is a boarding school mentality during the summer session.
Now, with these summer school cadets that you have on campus, are they mostly cadets from the school year, or are these a lot of people who are new to the Fishburne world?
Well, I think that changes. It changes with time. We've had years in which the summer school population has predominantly been cadets at Fishburne Military School, but for whatever reason this year, we have a relatively meager population of what we refer to as old men from Fishburne, and the vast majority of our students or cadets in our summer session are people who have never attended Fishburne Military School before.
So let's talk a little bit about your background and how you found Fishburne.
Several long stories, so I will try to make it as brief as possible. But as you mentioned, I was a career naval aviator for 30 years. Most of my career was operational in that I was flying. I think I was on flying overs for about 24 or 25 of the years. But during one stint, I did have a staff job, and it allowed me to have some free time. And during that time frame, I coached a high school lacrosse program in the area in which I resided. And the Lord blessed me tremendously throughout my career, and with command opportunities of a fighter squadron, a fighter wing, the entire naval contingent in Afghanistan. And eventually the ROTC unit at the University of Virginia. But I would say this volunteer high school lacrosse coach position, in which I lost money because of what you do as a volunteer, was arguably the most rewarding position I ever had, because you really had the sensation that you were making a difference in young men's lives. And I coached about probably 90 to 100 young men over the course of 4 years. And I can say with all certainty, at least 10, probably about 20 of them, and I have a couple of specific stories that I could convey, but I will skip for time. Frankly, moving them in the right direction for their lives, or in many cases a different direction in their lives that was more positive, is quite intoxicating, and that's what made me, or led me to believe that this is something that I wanted to do after I retired from the Navy. As far as how I ended up at Fishburne, as I mentioned, I finished up as the Naval ROTC commander at the University of Virginia, and right before I retired, a lady, University of Virginia is in Charlottesville, so that's about a 25, 30-minute transit from Waynesboro. And one of the ladies that is a DOD, Department of Defense civilian at the Army ROTC program, which we actually had a good working relationship with them. She's from Waynesboro, is affiliated with Fishburne, knows some people here. She mentioned to me that, hey, Fishburne is in need of a superintendent. It's something you ought to look into. And I said, okay, since I'm going to be have the opportunity to look for work, I put in an application, and approximately 2 months later they called me. Now, I will say the funny aspect of a naval aviator coming to be the superintendent of Fishburne Military School is anybody that is remotely familiar with Fishburne will recognize that Fishburne has a very steeped history with the United States Army. In fact, our JROTC program actually evolved out of an infantry school that was established here during World War I. Therefore, when I found out of the steep history associated with the Army at Fishburne, I thought the probability that they would select a naval aviator was very remote. And therefore, my primary interest coming here was, hey, this will be a good practice because they're not going to hire a Navy guy. And lo and behold, I show up for the interview, and they prominently had all of the service flags displayed except one, the United States Navy. So my wife and I kind of chuckled at that. So there was no pressure during the interview, and it evidently went well. They called me up about 2 weeks, said we would like to offer you the position. You need to come here for us to officially announce you. And needless to say, the first thing my wife and I did as we drove back onto the post for the introduction ceremony was to see if they had the flags displayed, and sure enough, there was a brand new Navy flag there. So that's how I ended up coming to Fishburne. I realized that they were serious about it.
Let's talk a little bit about Fishburne. What kind of students attend your school, and what kind of students is your school kind of built for?
Fishburne is probably like any other, I would say, private boarding school in this respect, is the type of student that we have. There's a significant array. We have individuals here that are scholastically and physically at the top of their game. We will always have a number of cadets that are competing to go to one of the different service academies or some top-tier university. And then at the same, in all honesty, we will have some people that are not at the higher echelon of scholastic ability or even physical ability. So that necessarily presents a challenge, but one of the things that we have found is that putting that contingent of people in a relatively small classrooms, because I think one of our greatest strengths is Fishburne is relatively small. About the maximum that the Corps can be is 200. So therefore, there's no place to hide. People are going to be able, they are going to be instructable in that they are going to be accessible. And if you indicate that you need help, the faculty and staff are going to recognize that, and you will get the modicum of attention needed to move you in the direction necessary for you to be productive. I think that is one of the more attractive aspects of the school, and what that does is it helps those individuals that are competing for those very competitive positions, whether it be one of the service academies or a school like the University of Virginia, University of North Carolina, and other places up and down the eastern seaboard, which is predominantly where our students come from, is I would say east of the Mississippi. As those people aspire, they are the folks that are probably not at that level. It effectively brings them up and has them achieve a level of performance, both in the classroom and on the playing field, that surpasses what they would normally achieve if left to their own devices at a bigger school or a bigger public school.
Now, you mentioned your JROTC program, and I've spoken with the head of that before. He's very involved in the students' lives. In fact, he mentioned one of his favorite things was the level of involvement he could have with each one of his cadets. And that's a very distinctive program, and I don't know if a lot of people know what junior ROTC is. Can you kind of talk about it a little bit?
The JROTC program is based off of the normal ROTC program that exists at universities throughout the United States. And those are what ROTC stands for is Reserve Officer Training Corps. So the purpose of the ROTC in college is to bring young men and women into the United States military, whether it be in the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, or Air Force, and each one of the services has their own distinctive ROTC variety, although the NROTC is naval, it's not Navy, and that feeds both the Navy and the Marine Corps, since they're both part of the Department of the Navy. But anyway, so people have a little bit of, I don't know, the right word is apprehension, particularly when we start talking about secondary students. Wait a second, you're talking about getting people ready to go into the military, so is that what JROTC is? And that's not the case. Now, it will feed people into ROTC if in fact that is their desire, but the whole premise of JROTC, which is predominantly in public schools, is it's a citizenship program to ensure that people understand young people understand what is necessary to, what is important for you to know as a citizen of the United States and how you can contribute it to making and keeping this great country great. That is the premise of the program. So they go through a very thorough curriculum, and you're right, Colonel Hunt, Master Sergeant Morton, and previously First Sergeant Hensley, all of those individuals are very much engaged with the daily life of each and every one of their cadets. Now, they will do classroom work in instructing both in character development, taking people through the different core values associated with the United States military, but also explaining, here are the things that you need to know as a citizen of the United States, and what you need to do to continue this country in the direction that in the direction that we have previously been, and to keep us aspiring for what some people refer to as American exceptionalism. Now, it also is very keenly focused on developing individuals as leaders to make sure that they understand what they can do to bring people around them to the achievement of a collective goal that is more important than the individual. What's important is how does the team perform? How does the Corps, in this case, perform? And that is a great emphasis that we have. In fact, it's something that really distinguishes the school as I speak to alumni, and that really surprised me because although I'm speaking with great admiration for what our JROTC program does and the military program in general does at Fishburne Military School. But the thing that I have seen firsthand in terms of the greatest value of our military structure is not so much the number of great military leaders that we have produced, because in all honesty, about 10% of the Fishburne graduates over the course of the school's history have gone into the military. Now, that number has fluctuated over the years, particularly in the World War II years, and maybe to a lesser extent World War I. But still, 10% is a good number. So the vast majority of our people don't go into the military, but what that instruction has provided them is with a great sense of awareness in terms of how of leading those around them, particularly the people that are their contemporaries, and that allows them to really move up in the organizations that they go in terms of their civilian employment. And many of have been frankly amazed at the number of the Fishburne graduates that have gone on to own their own businesses, whether it be law firms, whether it be some type of manufacturing, or whether it be some type of service industry that didn't even require a college degree. Some of the individuals that I've seen that graduated, particularly in the 50s and the 60s, one in particular went into plumbing, but eventually developed a system for sewers, of all things, in which he was about one of the only guys in the country who could do it, and therefore, when I met him, he was retired in the villages in Florida, living a very grand life, and his biggest concern was which day of the week he was going to go deep sea fishing on a regular basis.
Now, you talked about the misconception a little bit about the military schools are making soldiers. And that's very far from the actual case of it. It's not Hollywood. Can you talk about other misconceptions that people have about your school and your students?
I think the biggest misconception with military schools in general is that, hey, this is a place for wayward souls, and everybody here is on some type of voucher program from some local juvenile detention facility, and we are remediating them. And that could not be farther from the truth. I mean, I'm not going to say that we have individuals that don't have any disciplinary problems previously, but I will tell you they are very, very much the minority. In fact, even coming here, I mean, I knew or I anticipated that we would have a number of kids that probably have been kicked out of schools. I mean, I don't have a very steeped background in private schools, but I know in talking to some of the people that have been at other schools, predominantly Christian schools, that was the case. And what has really surprised me is that's not the case here. In fact, I cannot really discern of virtually any of our individuals who have actually been removed from a public or another private school. And frankly, that kind of surprised me. Now, the other aspect is, like I said, is, or not the other aspect, but I think that stigma that exists on military schools probably emanates from the fact, and I know I can't speak to this in terms of Fishburne specifically. I know after the Vietnam War there was military schools kind of fell out of favor, and in many cases the student that I described previously, someone that had been in trouble, was essentially given an edict that you'll go to a military school, and the military school stayed in business during that time frame. And many of them went out of business. I can tell you just in about a 25-mile radius of where we are here in Waynesboro, there are one time 3 military schools, Fishburne being one of them, and the smallest, Augusta Military Academy and Stanton Military Academy, both of which were much larger than Fishburne, and both of those eventually went out of business during the time frame that I'm describing. I would tell you since then, in the last 25 years, military schools in general, Fishburne specifically, have continually upgraded the individuals that are coming here, and we are approaching a point now that really the folks that come here, as I mentioned before, they generally have a reason in that, like I said, they either have some aspirations of going to a military academy, or they just realize, hey, I need to go to a school in which I'm going to be more focused, and I need that structure. And one of the encouraging things for me right now is in the new students that we have coming both for this summer school session and potentially in the fall session, I've been really encouraged by the number of young men that I have spoken to in that process. And these are young guys, much more mature than I was at their age, 8th and 9th, to a lesser extent 10th graders, that have just said, I'm sick of being in a classroom in a public school in which, more than half of the class is not really focused or has aspirations in achieving, and I want to be around a bunch of guys that we're in competition to see who's the best. And I would tell you that's probably more indicative of the students that are not just coming to Fishburne, but I think are in many cases going to any military school in the United States today.
So as the head of a school, how do you determine the health of a school?
I think there's several aspects of making that determination. Needless to say, the most important aspect of what you just said is we're a school. So there's going to have to be some element in probably the greatest prominence regarding your academic performance. We have to demonstrate that we are getting people into the colleges, into the programs that they want to. I mean, let's face it, we're a private school. You have to pay tuition. We need to be worth the effort to come here to get you to where you want to be in the future. So the academics is vitally important. Since we are a military school, another aspect that I think really distinguishes us from not just public schools, but also other private or boarding schools, is the military overlay of our educational system, which teaches not just leadership, which is a vital component that people need to possess if they are going to advance in the future, but it also teaches them time management. As I was at the University of Virginia, it was amazing to me how many of these very intelligent young people, much more intelligent than I am, had difficulty, transitioning from where mom and dad are taking care of you to where nobody's taking care of you, and you have to have the self-discipline to get up on time to get to that class or to go see that professor or whatever the case may be, so that you went on to get the grades necessary to eventually graduate from a very prestigious university. What we see with our cadets is they have a much more acute awareness of that. So that's one of the things that you have to evaluate is, okay, academics, the military apparatus in terms of, is that producing the modicum of performance both in organization and in leadership that we want. And then finally, you ultimately have to look at the financials associated with the school to determine, are we healthy and are we viable for the future? Because that's something I think anybody that is contemplating going into this, you want to make sure you go to a school that's going to be around. And one of the things that we are very proud of here at Fishburne is being the oldest military school in Virginia. We've got a track record of making that happen since 1879.
Now, you've just finished your first school year. I think you said it was 10 months in now.
That's correct.
What accomplishments are you the most proud of from this first year?
Well, I think being new to this environment, the thing I am personally probably most proud of is that I did not interfere with the school and come in and insinuate that I had all the answers. The one thing that I come away from my first year is the only thing I'm sure of that I know is that I don't know the answers to all the questions that I'm confronted with on a daily basis. And luckily I have a very tremendous faculty and staff that I rely on to provide me the information to make value-added decisions. As far as the performance of the Corps, I will tell you they did outstanding in that we were for the first time, actually the second time, I have to correct myself, Fishburne participated in an inaugural parade, which was a great endeavor. The cadets really were exposed to something that was very special. It was historic. The Corps performed very well, and one of the things I'm proud of this year is, although we didn't put somebody into a service academy, we do have two of our cadets still on waiting lists that are waiting to see if they got into either West Point or Annapolis. We did have 8 cadets receive ROTC scholarships to some pretty prestigious universities. Off the top of my head, they were Ohio State, Ohio University. We had somebody going to Arizona State, University of Colorado. So as you can see, a pretty wide array. And I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this one first. And we have 2 going to the Virginia Military Institute on an ROTC, which is my alma mater. So that is a banner performance. If you consider that, based off the number of students that we had graduate this year, that's 20% of our student body received a scholarship to go to college. So therefore, that goes back to my point of the health of the school. With an academic performance or an academic performance in which 20% of the people that attended this school are now going to have their college paid for other than their room and board, I think that's indicative of a school that is succeeding in that realm. The other piece that the Corps did very well, I think we were challenged from an athletic perspective in that we are a small school, and most of the schools that we compete with are at least twice our size. But even with that said, we had two teams that achieved state championships, one of which was our rifle team, which is one of the few in the country for that matter. And they won their third state championship in a row. And also our wrestling team, who were essentially named the state champions in independent schools of the state of Virginia. For a school our size to produce that many good wrestlers is really indicative of a great program. And Coach Waters is just a tremendous coach and has really built the program very well, and hopefully we continue to maintain that success. Also, a couple of other sports that did well did not rise to a state championship, but competed very well at the conference level. Was our baseball team, who beat several of the top 5 teams in the state. Our track team did exceptionally well at the conference level, and our basketball team did very well at the conference level. One of the other pieces we talked about, JROTC, we have a number of activities that really constitute sporting programs affiliated with the JROTC program, one of which is what we call regulation, and that's kind of a platoon level drill team. And then we have an exhibition armed drill team, which is at the squad level, and we refer to those individuals as our Hudgens Rifles. And finally, we have a group of individuals that go under the moniker of Raiders, and it's a Raiders competition, which is predicated upon the best Ranger competition of the United States Army. And one of the things we're proud about those individuals is in our district, and they don't compete at the national level, they compete within district levels. In our district, we have 7 states, which really constitute the Mid-Atlantic region. And don't quote me on the number, but it's something to the magnitude of 340 high schools, both public and private. And, you can imagine how many students that are. Well, every year they have what they refer to as the best of the best competition. And Little Fishburne Military School was selected or qualified, I should say, as one of the top 20 teams in the district that I just mentioned. And eventually finished 8th place, which, initially you're thinking 8th place, but when you consider all of the schools, really almost all 20 of the schools that were in the competition other than Fishburne, you're looking at student bodies of over 1,000, and we have about 150, and we're competing toe-to-toe with those individuals. So all in all, when you look at the accomplishments of Fishburne Military School during the academic year of 2017, it was a quite impressive array of accomplishments.
So as the new head of a school, let's talk about your plans moving forward. Where's your school going to be 10 years from now?
I will tell you, 10 years is a long ways away. I mean, my experience on active duty military is there's I'm not even going to get the acronym correct. There's something called the FIDP, the Fiscal Year Development Plan, and that is 5 years. So I would tell you 5 years is about as far out as I can see realistically. But I think there's a lot of interesting things for education. I have a weakness in that I'm new to secondary education. But I also have a strength in that I'm new to secondary education, and I'm not necessarily encumbered with all of the in-the-box type of thinking. One of the things that I see, I want to see what is out there that we can, again, justify the cost of tuition of attending Fishburne Military School. And one of the interesting things, we are a college preparatory school, and we are dedicated to that. But one of the things that concerns me in our society and in today's day and age is the fact that, a young man or young woman can go to college and get their degree, do exceptionally well, But, is there a job out there to support them, and are they going to have a significant amount of debt when they graduate? That's kind of a concerning situation. It's almost a double punch when someone graduates. If they don't have that job they can walk right into, and how are they going to pay off in some cases the immense amount of debt? So one of the things that I want to investigate, is there any way that we at Fishburne can look at those kids that might not be interested in going to college? I mean, they want to achieve in the classroom, but for whatever reason they do not want to, or maybe can't even afford to go to college. The biggest weakness in our society right now is that we do not have enough skilled labor. So one of the things we're investigating is there an opportunity for us to have some high-powered academics in core principles, but also be able to have somebody walk out of Fishburne Military School with an apprenticeship or some type of certification in a skill that they could walk right into some type of employment situation in which they're making a very reasonable amount of money and they have absolutely no debt. I've done some reading recently, and a number of people here, as we've discussed it, there are some recommendations out there right now that is a better way of doing the traditional 4 years worth of college and then moving on into the career. Just due to what the job market dictates and what is available out there, or the amount of debt that is accumulated as they're going through those schools. The other thing I would tell you, going back to the traditional military model, is I really think, I have a perspective. My personal belief is I'm a Christian, and I truly believe that if you look at leadership, one of the greatest leaders that ever existed, and we talk about him today still, is Jesus Christ. And he really exemplified a servant leader. And that's one of the things we really want to concentrate here at Fishburne Military School, and we're trying to define how to develop that attitude in which, yes, I'm in charge and I'm responsible and I'm accountable, but my objective is to bring you along and improve you so that we achieve things, you get better, and we all succeed in the end. I think that is the model that I want to exemplify here at Fishburne, and really have our young men depart Fishburne with a clear understanding that leadership is a responsibility and a privilege, and it is vitally important for individuals that are blessed with leadership positions understand that does not mean that they are entitled to other people serving them. It is vitally important for the organization for them to serve those who are beneath them.
I'd like to talk about some recent graduates of Fishburne and the successes they're having learned this leadership and the servant leadership from your school, and how they've moved on to the next step in their life.
When you say recent, realize, Andrew, I'm pretty old to a certain. I'm realizing that. I don't know if I accept that or not, but a recent graduate might be somebody 20 years ago. So are you talking about within about 10 years, 5 years, or what time frame are you looking for?
Let's do 10 years or less.
Okay, so I'm going to go to some of the people that I'm familiar with. So we currently have 6 individuals that are at one of the service academies. I believe we have someone at the Naval Academy, several at West Point. We have one at the Coast Guard Academy. We have one at the Merchant Marine Academy. The only service academy we do not have somebody at is I do not believe we have anybody at the Air Force Academy. We have, I want to say, a number of students at the Virginia Military Institute, the Citadel in South Carolina, and at Norwich University in Vermont, all of which are senior military schools or senior military colleges. And also, I should have mentioned, I apologize, we have a number of individuals that are at Virginia Tech, some of which are in the Corps Cadets and some of which are just students there, which Virginia Tech is another senior military college. So we're hitting that mark. We have we've sent a number of, just this year we had individuals accepted at University of Southern California, University of California at Los Angeles, or better known as UCLA, as I mentioned, Arizona State, University of Colorado. I'm trying to think, Ohio State, University of Ohio, and a number of schools, University of Virginia, and Virginia Tech. So again, some of the more preeminent schools in the United States. I think one of the things that is interesting of the individuals that have gone on, while I was at the University of Virginia, my first contact with a Fishburne graduate was a student that was part of the Army JROTC program, and it just so happened that he was the son of a friend of mine, and he informed me that he was a Fishburne graduate. So he is now has graduated from the University of Virginia, and he is serving in the United States Army as an intelligence officer. We have another individual from the University of Virginia that I recently met. In fact, we had him speak at our Honor Society commencement, not commencement ceremony, but induction ceremony in the fall of 2016. So he's a graduate of Fishburne, has graduated from the University of Virginia, and now he is functioning up in New York City with one of the hedge funds, probably making more money than I could accumulate in a long period of time. And he was just a 2008 graduate of Fishburne and 2012 graduate of the University of Virginia. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a flavor. And there's several other stories similar to that of people that have gone on and they're currently either in the military or pursuing some professional license, whether it be a doctor, lawyers. For whatever reason, it seems like Fishburne has a propensity to either produce lawyers or construction company owners. And that's more of the graduates that I've met that are from the 80s, 70s, and 60s. And I don't know what the connection of those two are, but as I meet our alumni throughout the country, it seems like there is a plethora of them that are either, like I said, lawyers or construction company owners. But that kind of gives you a flavor for where they're at, and it's again a great privilege to have the opportunity and the responsibility to make sure that we continue that type of tradition in terms of the achievement of our graduates.
Well, sir, I appreciate you giving us this time to talk about your wonderful school. And it's certainly been an honor to talk to you about this. Well, I know you're a busy gentleman.
Well, believe me, the pleasure is all mine.
You were listening to the Military Schooler Podcast. Find out more about these unique boarding schools at militaryschooler.com.
My grandmother had great wisdom, and she told me, there's two ways of learning in life. There are those who learn through experience and those who learn through judgment. And you must realize that experience is gained by practicing poor judgment. My goal as a leader, previously at University of Virginia and now at Fishburne Military Schools, I've got lots of experience because I've made lots of mistakes. My objective is to upload my experience